I'm Nancy, a 39-year-old working mother, and I married my college sweetheart, Kevin, when I was 24. Now, our son Samuel is 9, and while I once imagined our marriage would sail smoothly, the reality has been far more unpredictable. Recently, Kevin mentioned a New Year's gathering at my parents' house, casually asking for my help with preparations. As I flipped through some cherished family photos, my thoughts drifted to Kevin's words, and a familiar heaviness settled over me. To him, it might just be another New Year's celebration, but for me, it carries a weight that's hard to bear. The annual event at my in-laws has become the most trying day of the year since we tied the knot. Dealing with my mother-in-law's constant barbs and unsolicited visits has been an exhausting battle. The New Year's gathering only amplifies this struggle. Even though it occurs less frequently, it is fraught with tension. For me, intense translates to a day of relentless emotional turmoil. In past gatherings, my mother-in-law's usually passive-aggressive comments turned sharply critical when I prepared the food. I remember her polite yet cutting remark, "Is this what you feed my son every day? It looks awful." I suggested she skip eating if she was unhappy, but her critiques persisted, culminating in embarrassment as she served the same dishes she had disparaged to our arriving guests. As I jumped through hoops to meet her demands, Kevin sat nearby, visibly frustrated but entirely uninvolved. I felt as if I was mentally preparing for a boxing match, just trying to survive another year of this daunting New Year's gathering. Just when I thought I could forget about the upcoming event, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from my mother-in-law. Ignoring it, I flipped the phone face down. The ringing stopped, bringing a momentary sense of relief, but it was short-lived as the landline rang next. I sighed, knowing all too well who was calling. "Hello?" I answered reluctantly. "You took your sweet time picking up," she exclaimed, disregarding my attempt to explain my busyness. I was left with no choice but to apologize. She announced her plans for another New Year's gathering, insisting I arrive early to help. While I didn't mind lending a hand, I couldn't help but wonder why Kevin was never expected to pitch in. When I brought it up, she quickly defended him, citing his work commitments and dismissing any notion of him taking on household or childcare responsibilities. The next morning, I found myself reluctantly heading to my in-laws' house, a sense of dread heavy in the air. As expected, the day unfolded with a series of demanding tasks: cleaning, laundry, shopping, and yard work, leaving me feeling like a maid in someone else's home. My father-in-law was as unresponsive as ever, a mere shadow in the background. Once the chores were done, the real fun began: cooking. Despite my best efforts, my mother-in-law found fault with every dish I made, making my culinary efforts feel utterly futile. My patience wore thin, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check. The breaking point came when relatives arrived, leaving me drained and without a moment to eat amid the chaos. By the end of the day, I felt like a walking zombie, drained of any positive memories from these gatherings. Each year, I dreaded this annual ordeal, clinging to the thought that at least I only had to endure it once. As I watched Kevin effortlessly mingle and enjoy himself, I couldn't help but sigh deeply, reflecting on the exhausting nature of this day. Finally, the day of the New Year's gathering arrived. Amid the cheerful, "Happy New Year" greetings, Kevin and Samuel greeted our guests with enthusiasm. While I felt invisible, my mother-in-law handed me a note, her expression as emotionless as ever. The note shocked me. Even though we were 3 days into the new year, 12 kilograms of detergent. "There's a sale, and don't forget at least 56 cans of beer because we love to drink." Stunned by her audacity, I watched as she retreated inside, leaving me to process the realization that, yes, the supermarket was indeed open. Kevin, my silent cry for help, was drowned out by the alcohol he'd already consumed. With a resigned sigh, I set out to tackle the unexpected shopping list. When I returned, struggling with heavy bags, the lively atmosphere inside contrasted sharply with my exhaustion. Samuel greeted me with a smile, a brief moment of relief in the madness. As I settled down, my eyes fell on an extravagant sushi platter gracing the table, filled with high-end delicacies like tuna, shrimp, and salmon. A sinking feeling hit me. There was no platter set aside for me. As the conversation flowed around me, I sat next to Samuel, quietly contemplating the absence of my share. When he offered to share his food, I couldn't bring myself to accept a child's offering. My mother-in-law casually acknowledges her forgetfulness and reappears with a box labeled "Yours." To my shock, it's a haphazardly packed sushi box from the supermarket, marked down to $9 due to its impending expiration. As I take in the sight, my anger simmers. Everyone else indulges in high-end sushi while I'm left with this cheap alternative. Kevin and my mother-in-law share a laugh at my expense, while the other relatives and my father-in-law shift uncomfortably but say nothing. The heavy shopping burden was merely the opening act. This blatant disregard for my feelings has become the main event of the annual humiliation. Frustration builds within me as I notice Samuel looking up at me with concern, which ignites my anger. I take a deep breath, attempting to suppress my feelings and adopt a conciliatory demeanor. My mother-in-law, sensing my struggle, laughs triumphantly and mocks me about my desire for the fancy sushi. The harsh reality of this annual harassment washes over me, and I let out a heavy sigh. Recognizing the depth of the situation, I exit the room, making it clear that I'm not offering an apology. A warm smile graces my face as I announce, I'm done playing the good wife. Despite my mother-in-law's disapproving glare at my abrupt proclamation, I march into the kitchen, grab the shopping bags, and return with a cheerful demeanor. Hey everyone, the drinks are here, I declare, arranging the packs of canned beer on the table, prompting a stunned silence from the crowd. Undeterred, I maintain my upbeat tone, recounting the amusing challenges of gathering the items and playfully highlighting Kevin's lack of assistance. With a triumphant flair, I draw attention to my impressive haul, boasting, and I even managed to snag 25 pounds of detergent. I encouraged everyone to enjoy the beer I proudly announced I had bought, casually dismissing it as just another of my mother-in-law's demands. I handed out cans to everyone except my son, reveling in the warmth of the room and the perfect fit of a cold beer for a winter gathering. Yet, I soon noticed an unsettling silence enveloping the space. Confused, I urged everyone to lighten up and enjoy themselves, volunteering to handle snacks and do the dishes, emphasizing that they could have fun while I worked in the background. Feeling breathless from my spirited speech, I surveyed the room, only to be met with an oppressive silence, shattered by my mother-in-law's voice. You really don't understand your duties as a wife, do you? She critiqued. I felt a surge of defensiveness rise within me. I understand the importance of helping, I replied, but what I'm doing goes beyond mere assistance. I feel like I'm treated more like a maid than a daughter-in-law. She shot back, justifying her actions as a way to educate her son's wife, including the humiliating discrimination regarding the sushi. I challenged her perspective, questioning the morality of treating one's son's wife in such a manner. My words hung in the air, and for a moment, she fell silent. In that silence, Kevin spoke up, trying to defend his mother. You need to consider how hard it is for Mom to host this party. I shot him a sharp glare, causing him to flinch slightly. He responded with a defiant look, a flash of the complex dynamics swirling within our family. You should apologize to Mom, he insisted. Before he could continue, I interrupted him. Kevin, first of all, this is your home. I've been helping because it's your family, yet what have you contributed as the actual son? You're not helping at all. You don't even notice that your wife is out lugging heavy bags. What's going on? You just stroll in here, eat, and drink without a care in the world. When you see your wife being treated this way, you say, lucky you? What's lucky about this? My voice raised. Kevin shrank back under my intense gaze, appearing pitiful. Then my mother-in-law retaliated. You're so arrogant for a daughter-in-law. What do you think you're doing? We don't need a woman like you here. You should divorce him immediately. Kevin remained speechless as his mother continued her tirade. A wife's role is to listen to her in-laws and follow her husband. Next time, marry someone who will obey. At her forceful words, a spark ignited within me. Oh, so you're a submissive wife who never goes against your husband? I challenged, pulling out a photo from my bag that I always carried. The moment felt monumental, accompanied by an imaginary triumphant trumpet sound in my mind. So obedient, mother-in-law. What's this? I scattered the photos across the table, and they fluttered down like autumn leaves. Gasps filled the room as everyone's eyes widened at the shocking images. What is this? Someone exclaimed. Who is that man she's holding hands with? Wait, are they going into a hotel? The photos revealed my mother-in-law with an unknown man in each shot, cozying up together. Some images far too explicit for children to see. What on earth are they doing in public? I questioned, ensuring Samuel couldn't catch a glimpse. It had always seemed odd that she would frequently drop by without a clear reason, especially given how much time she spent away from my father-in-law. I had noticed her arriving at our home dressed up for no apparent reason, which raised my suspicions. So, I had taken the initiative to hire a private investigator to look into her activities, and here were the results. Mom, what is going on? It's not what it looks like, my mother-in-law exclaimed desperately, her voice trembling as she faced Kevin and the bewildered relatives. Yet the evidence lay before us, irrefutable and damning. In the midst of disbelief, her panic escalated as she turned to my father-in-law, pleading for reassurance. You believe me, right? This isn't what it seems, she urged. For the first time, my father-in-law, usually so stoic, glared at her with cold, snake-like eyes. Unlike his usual demeanor, genuine anger radiated from him. A strange sound escaped my mother-in-law's throat as she stammered, "It's not what it looks like." Shoving her hand aside, my father-in-law approached me, an unexpected look of remorse on his face. "I'm truly sorry for everything," he said sincerely. "I thought you were okay handling all the work, but even if that were true, it was wrong of me to let you shoulder it alone. I apologize." The relatives quickly chimed in with their apologies. "Could you share those incriminating photos?" my father-in-law asked, his voice steady but regretful. "Absolutely, I have all the data and can provide as many as you need," he nodded, taking the photos from me with an air of solemnity before exiting the room, my mother-in-law's pitiful pleas trailing behind him as she followed. The remaining guests began to clean up in silence, packing away leftover food, washing dishes, wiping down tables. What had once been my solitary burden transformed into a collaborative effort. The shared labor proved not only easier but incredibly fulfilling, a stark contrast to the emotional weight I'd carried alone for so long. In the weeks following that assertive New Year's gathering, my father-in-law called to share some surprising news. He had finalized his divorce from my mother-in-law. Cast out of the home she had taken for granted, she sought solace with her affair partner, only to find herself abandoned when alimony demands surfaced. Shunned by the very relatives who once supported her, she turned to her strict brother, living a constrained life under his watchful eye. Meanwhile, I found myself separated from Kevin, a husband who contributed nothing and offered no defense in my favor. Living apart didn't bother me. I had rented the apartment before we married and had always been the one to pay the bills. I insisted it was only fair that Kevin move out. He clung to the idea of a fresh start, but to me, it felt far too late. His prior financial freedom had relied heavily on my income, leaving him struggling in a cheap apartment while frequently seeking my help. Unmoved by his pleas, I continued to ignore them. Interestingly, Samuel, my son, didn't seem to mind his father's absence at all. It underscored how little Kevin had been involved in our lives. As Samuel animatedly discussed school with a bright smile, I realized my path was becoming clear. Together, we were about to embark on a new chapter, one full of promise and independence. Samuel,